Hi, my name's Ed Szymanski. I am the chef and owner of Dame and Lords in the Greenwich Village in New York City. I am here today with Food52 to make quail on toast. This is one of the classic recipes from Lords. It's been on my menus over the past few years in one format or another. I love it because it's seasonal, it's comforting and hearty. To begin the recipe, we'll make a mushroom puree. This will serve as the butter almost that holds the quail on the toast. We start with some button mushrooms. We're going to cook them over quite a high heat in some butter and olive oil, a little shallot and garlic. And then we'll deglaze with some colatura, which is a style of Italian fish sauce, a little cream to hold the emulsion, and then we'll blend it. And this will keep the quail in place. Fits very nicely with the mild gamey flavor of the quail. Doesn't really matter how you cut them because we're going to blend this once it's done. We're going to cut them kind of thin just so it doesn't take forever. We have all our mushrooms chopped up. And whilst our pan's heating up, we're gonna dice our shallot and garlic too. The quail on toast has been on the menu at Lord's. It's a seasonal dish, so it comes off and on each fall. I think it's an appropriate thing to eat when the leaves start turning and it gets a little bit cooler at night. In the summer, we take it off and do lighter toasts. The restaurants are not particularly fancy. They're quite casual neighborhood restaurants, and these kind of dishes lean into that nature, but we want to do the best version of everything we can. Started down a career path in finance, actually. When I was at university, I thought sort of mistakenly that I wanted to be an investment banker from a very young age. I got into cooking sort of as an accident. I happened to really enjoy eating at this restaurant, and they put out an ad saying they were hiring staff, and I said, well, maybe I'll give it a go. And I had no experience whatsoever. They didn't hire me for money, but I said, oh, I'll show up and work for free for you every day. And they said, oh, all right, that doesn't sound so bad. So I did that for quite a long time until eventually I became like halfway decent and they started paying me. And that was my culinary school. It was my baptism by fire in this very demanding, very talented kitchen in Soho in London at the time. This was in 2012, I think. And I just loved it. I fell in love with the culture of the kitchens, with the food, with the exposure to this different style of life, and very different than all my friends who are bankers and lawyers and all this sort. I never looked back, sort of worked my way up through kitchens. Moved to New York, did the standard line cook, sous chef, chef de cuisine thing, and then after a few years I thought I really want to open my own place and noticed that there aren't a lot of restaurants in New York, well, I would say very few at all, cooking modern English food, which is a shame. It has such a stigma in the States as being bad, and that comes from people in the post-war era eating the stodgy English food of the 60s and 70s, and I mean then it was bad. Nowadays, the London dining scene is one of the most vibrant, if not the most vibrant, in the world. So I wanted to bring a little bit of that to New York. The reception to the restaurants has been great. We are looking for color in this process. I'm adding oil throughout. We don't want the mushrooms to swim in oil, but we don't want them to be in contact with a dry pan either. You see how much water these mushrooms evaporated off? Part of the idea of this is we want to concentrate the mushroom flavor. Starting to develop some color on the mushrooms and some color in the pan. This is great, this is what we want. Add our shallots now. And our garlic. And our knob of butter. All of this brown around the edge, what they call the fond in the pan, is just like layers of flavor waiting to be incorporated into the sauce. This is why the deglazing process is so important, because it picks up and dissolves all of these little caramelizing, mushroomy, shalloty bits. Toast the pepper in the butter for just a moment. I will deglaze with the white wine, careful not to set your eyebrows on fire. You can see that picks up all of these brown flavors from around the pan. And the wine is really just to pick up all those, the fond that you can see. That pan was sort of brown over here and now it's clear, and all of that brown stuff is now, the flavor is in the mushrooms, which is exactly where we want it to be. And the sauce is smelling great. Now that's pretty much all evaporated. We're going to add our colatura. And so if you can't find colatura, fish sauce is totally fine. It smells quite intense. If you don't have either colatura or fish sauce, you could put an anchovy fillet in here too. That would also work. Okay. We'll add a little cream. And if you're at home, you can get your kids to nicely portion out all the ingredients in little bowls. Makes the cooking a lot easier. So thank you to the team here for doing that. I've been nibbling on these mushrooms. Before I eat them all, we're going to blend this and turn it into our mushroom puree. At this stage, it's important that there's, you know, enough liquid to blend. Like if you just had solid mushrooms, it wouldn't blend up so well. This is not very glamorous, but you sort of blend it until it's pretty smooth. You can do this in a food processor as well. It's a mushroom smoothie. All right, that'll do. Mushroom puree. The mushroom puree is to the side, so now we're going to make the pickled prunes, which will garnish the top of the quail. This is a very simple step. We use prunes in the fall, cherries in the summer, sour cherries for the brief 2-week period they're in season. Lots of different fruit works this way. It's a very quick pickle, a couple different kinds of vinegars, a little bit of sugar, some cinnamon, water, and then we're gonna heat that up, pour it over the prunes and let them sit, and then we're gonna chop them up once they're cool. The sweeter the fruit, the less amount of sugar you should use. So these are prunes are dried plums. So they're quite sweet, so we don't need a lot of sugar. Some red wine vinegar. Some sherry vinegar, some water, a couple sticks of, or just 1 stick of cinnamon actually should do the trick, and some brown sugar. And the idea here is to add element sweetness to the quail, also an element of acidity and something to cut through the richness. That mushroom puree is quite salty, quite buttery. The quail itself will be, you know, golden brown and glossy, with a crispy skin. The sauce underneath will be quite rich. It's on toast, so you want some acid to cut through it. That's where the pickle comes in. It smells nice and Christmassy in here because of the cinnamon. We're gonna let this sit at least for a couple of hours. But you could leave these refrigerated for a long time, like months. These would be fine in the fridge, as long as they stay in their pickling liquid. Now the prunes are pickling. We're back 2 months later, and we're gonna start making the sauce, which will be the base of the dish. To prepare the sauce, it's a very simple, so we'll add butter. We're going to color off our bones a little bit with some of the alliums, and then we'll deglaze with red wine, deglaze with port, and then we'll reduce them both down, add some chicken stock, and that's pretty much it. So all the old finance friends now, some of them are investors in the restaurant, which is useful to have. But a lot of them come to the restaurant. Yeah, everyone from my childhood says, "Oh my God, you cook for a living? What a strange, different thing." I said, "Yeah, I got lucky that, you know, I followed my dreams and it worked out." And a lot of them now will ask me like, "Oh, how can I do this? How can I follow my version of my dream?" kind of thing. You know, they're in their mid-30s and have been accountants, bankers for a while and looking to make changes. And I say, well, it's whatever you decide to do, it's worth pursuing it because you have to work every day. You may as well choose to do something that you love. And same as we were for the mushroom puree, just like paying close attention to our pan, to our ingredients, making sure they're cooking evenly, that they're coloring nicely, that no part is burning. Especially, you know, in a sauce, you're really going to notice if you burn the garlic, the whole sauce is going to be ruined, which would be a shame. A lot of my inspiration for new recipes comes from reading cookbooks, especially old English cookbooks, discovering ingredients or flavors that might have been forgotten and trying to modernize them. A lot of it comes from eating out at other great restaurants. It comes from, these days, from Instagram, looking at what other chefs do around the world. Talking to chef friends. I'm fortunate to have friends throughout the country who like-minded. We talk about ideas all the time. And it's a slow process too. It involves my team, especially the culinary leaders at the restaurants who have their own ideas, and we sort of make sure that the food is within the style of the restaurants. But we're constantly like today after this shoot, we'll go back to the restaurant. Me and my chef de cuisine at Lord's will try a couple of new dishes tonight for the menu tonight. We'll always be innovating, trying new stuff. See, this is where we're at. Nice and dark brown. We'll add our white peppercorns this time to toast them off a little bit. And just as we're getting to the stage where this looks like, oh, it's getting pretty brown, now we're going to add our red wine. And we will add 3/4 of our port, not all. We want to save a little bit of the port at the end to add like a wininess to the sauce. Aromatic herbs can go in, thyme and bay leaves. We used white peppercorns for this instead of black because they have a muskiness that I think is very nice with quail. I opened a restaurant because the go-to English comfort food I craved was fish and chips. There weren't a lot of good versions of it in New York. There were a couple, but not many. We opened Dame, our first restaurant, to sell fish and chips, and it became so popular. I didn't really think Americans would like fish and chips, or I didn't understand how much Americans like fish and chips. A lot of these sauces, and just sauce work in general, it's about feel and balance, the right proportions of things at the right time, just paying close attention to your ingredients. We're looking pretty good here. Pretty soupy, so now we'll add our chicken stock. And then this sauce, now we will reduce to a simmer. We'll let it come down over the course of the next 2 hours or so. Our sauce has been cooking. It's now down to a pretty nice consistency, a nice texture. It's getting glossy. We're going to add our finishing components. So our grapes, red grapes. And then a little bit of raw port at the end. This sauce is getting pretty good now, so now we'll start to strain it. And you think of the grapes at the end as more of like an infusion kind of thing than anything else. This sauce is thickened, it's glossy, it's got a lovely texture to it. Taste. Tastes like grapes, unlike port, tastes like quail, tastes like the alliums. It's another important thing in sauce making, you want to be able to taste each component of it. Now we have completed our mise en place for the dish. We're going to toast the bread and cook the quail. We'll do it simultaneously because the toast is just an inactive process. So to do the quail, if you don't have an outdoor charcoal grill, which would be the best or preferred method for doing this, a grill pan on the stove works totally fine. If you don't have that, a saute pan works fine too. We're just cooking it. It's nice to give it some smoky, charred flavor by turning our burners on. We'll add a little bit of salt to the quail. We're gonna cook them both in duck fat. The quail won't really need much duck fat, but the toast will. If you don't have duck fat, olive oil is a totally acceptable substitute. The toast is cooking in duck fat. We're going to add a little bit of duck fat to this grill pan so that the quail doesn't stick for us. If you had a paintbrush, this would be a good time to use it. All right, at this stage, make sure you have your quail cooking. Make sure you're not burning your toast. We have a little chervil here to garnish the quail with, a mushroom puree that we made earlier, and then our port sauces off to the side, staying warm too. If you do have animal fats around the house, it's really nice to cook with them. Yeah, making duck confit or roasting duck breast and you get all this rendered fat. It's very nice to save it. And this toast is now like glossy. You can pat it dry a little bit with this towel so it doesn't get too greasy. And then we're gonna flip the quail in a moment. Give it a few seconds. One thing to note with the quail, you wanna pay close attention to this leg bone here. This is where the thickest part of the bird will take the longest to cook over here. So just like with your spoon, gently press down to make sure that that's in contact with the pan. The spoon is hot, so by pressing it from the top, adds a little bit of heat from that side too. See, like without any cooking at all on the flesh side, it's starting to cook around the edge. This is just the heat from the bottom of the pan. So when I say we don't really need to spend time cooking the flesh side, that's why. It's like the skin is so thin it'll cook from the bottom up. And then we'll give it a little flip. Beautifully golden brown. And that's it. Our toast here, and we're gonna assemble the dish now. So we're gonna cut the toast in half. So this is what we want on the quail, nice and pink on the inside and nice and crispy and golden brown on the outside. And now to plate up, we're going to smear some of our mushroom puree on each bit of toast. Now we're going to add a quail half to each piece of toast and spoon some of the prune onto each quail. Now we'll garnish each with a little sprig of chervil. Not a fan of the places that just do like one little chervil on a big plate. Like, I think that's ridiculous. If you're gonna use the herb as a garnish, you should use it for its flavor. So, you know, enough chervil that you know it's there. And then, what's lovely about this is the sauce soaks into the bottom of the bread, which is like the best part. If you have the roast chicken with the baguette and the baguette absorbs all the juices from the chicken, like that's the idea behind the toast in the sauce. You want the bottom to be like nice and soft and gooey and taste like quail and mushrooms in the sauce. But the top of the toast stays crispy because it's not fully submerged, if that makes sense. There you have it. If you're feeling a little decadent, you can add a little more duck fat at the end, or at the restaurant we'll use some smoked oil as well to carry on the smoky flavor from the grill. But here you have it, grilled quail on toast. So to eat this, imagine it as a piece of nigiri or something. Like pick it up holding the top. Delicious. I think I'm gonna open a restaurant. The sweetness from the sauce marries really nicely with the earthiness from the mushrooms, the acidity from the pickled prunes, and then that quail. It really shows off all the natural flavors in the quail. I can see why this one is one of our most ordered dishes. And then this is like a natural handle for the quail, the leg bone. That's why we leave the leg bone in. I want to Henry VIII and throw it over your shoulder. That's our dish. Thank you for following along. If you do make this at home, then enjoy. If not, come to Lord's in the Greenwich Village in New York City. Come try our version.